Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. I don't know if I read this with it right. I was going to say time and temperature. What is it? Time and whatever, the rhythm. Cadence. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way. I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. How many of you are familiar with that poem? Fairly common. Used by people, placed on the desk of people that are going in an absolute opposite direction of the rest of the world in order to inspire them and empower them to continue to do it. Now, you've done something that other people have not done at some point. And the other people either pulled you down because they didn't want you to do it, because they thought it was silly, because they didn't have the strength, or for whatever other purpose, influenced you such that it was difficult to continue doing it. Now, this poem is helpful in that sense if you take it that way. And looking at it for it on the internet to copy and paste and use in worship, I saw that one critic, literary critic, said this was perhaps written just making fun of his friend, his walking buddy in the mornings who just never would pick. But we look at it at a little bit deeper level, as you've always heard in English class. Two choices. This will happen over and over again in your life. It will happen this afternoon. It will happen tomorrow, and it will happen on Wednesday. Two choices that you have in any number of realms. What is the right choice financially? What's the right choice for my relationship? What we're concerned with here is what is the right choice for my God? You've got two people here, Jonah and Jesus, who aren't always paired together. One's in the Old Testament, one's in the New Testament, but have very similar storylines that behaved in a slightly different way. Now, if you're not familiar with Jonah, I bet you know that he was in the belly of the whale. If you know that, then you know a lot about him. The reason he was in the belly of the whale is he didn't want to do what God asked him to do. He ran when he was asked to take on a responsibility. Jonah was asked to go and speak to people about the forgiving nature of God. He did not want to do it. The people wanted to listen, but he was not willing to do it. Jesus was asked to go and speak to people about the forgiving nature of God. He was willing to do it, but no one was willing to listen. Isn't that frustrating? Now, just to give you a little background of why Jonah would not want to do it, I want you to consider, have you ever been bullied in your life? Was it an emotional bully that said, look, if you don't do this, I'm going to cry? That's a sneaky sort of bully. If you don't do this, I'm going to tell you about it constantly for the rest of our relationship together. Or I'm going to cry if you don't do it. I'm going to pitch a fit if you don't do it. I'm going to whine if you don't do it. That person gets you to do whatever it is you don't want to do because you want to avoid whatever it is they're going to do more than that. Okay, does that make sense? How could I have said that in a more complicated fashion? That was insane. I'm bad about that. Emotional bullying. Then there's physical. I'm just going to push you. Fortunately, that only happened to me once, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3rd, 4th grade, and I was faster than the one pushing me, so that was the end of that. Just outrun him. If you were ever bullied on a real serious level, and you were given the opportunity to offer that bully a chance to get out of real trouble, would you want to help them? Who knows? You'd have a choice at that point. The people of Nineveh whom Jonah was asked to go and speak to, had bullied his people, had bullied him repeatedly. And God said, if you don't go there and speak to them about my grace and have them turn around, I'm going to smoke all of them. So if I don't go and tell the people that have bullied me for years about your loving grace, you're going to take them out. Is that what you're saying? God says yes. Jonah goes in the exact opposite direction. Does not want to speak to them, does not want to help them. Jesus is completely different. God inspires Jesus to go and speak to Jesus' own people about God's grace that they may turn. This is a familiar theme, that they may turn and actually pay attention to God. It comes all the way up to 2010. What can you say to get people to pay attention and turn towards the grace of God? Jesus is a willing participant, but the people to whom he's speaking are not willing participants. It's a wonder any sort of word of God gets to anyone, because most people don't want to bother with it, and the other half of people don't want to listen. Isn't that hard? I sort of snicker about it because I've got a dark sense of humor about ministry, but it's a hard thing to get anything done. The interesting thing is that these two men, going to two different types of people with two different motivations, end up in the same place. Intense prayer. I read for you Jonah. This is in the belly of the whale. This is his prayer in the belly of the whale. Consider, I never experienced this, but consider this desperation plea. You have a 78 in the class. It's May 18th. And you have got to have an 80 in that class to get the B to be able to do whatever you want for the rest of the summer. You say to the teacher who's yet to offer anything, what? What can I do here? An 18-page paper on this subject that I've been ignoring the last 98 days. Will that do it? Will that get me 2 points? If I come early and do whatever in the class for the next 18 days, just anything to get these 2 points. Now, I'm a bit of a skeptic. Jonah could have very well felt this deep within his heart and been completely spiritual and wanted to please God. In my opinion, given my experience, I think there's a little bit of 78 needing an 80 to get by. I'm in the belly of the whale, I need help. In my distress, I called out to the Lord, he said, and he answered me. From the depths of the grave, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled around me. All of your waves and breakers swept over me. When he was in that boat, going the exact opposite direction of what God wanted, a furious storm came up. The men on the boat who had nothing to do with Jonah said, what in the world are we doing here? He said, throw me off to the side, I'm the problem here. And they threw him off. The whale swallowed him. I said, I've been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. If I can just move on from this next place, I will look towards your holy temple always. I will pay attention to what you want me to do. The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me, the seaweed was wrapped around my head, which is a funny way. To the roots of the mountains I sank down, the earth barred me forever. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, O Lord. That's about as true as it gets, isn't it? When everything was going absolutely in the opposite direction of what I wanted, I remembered you. Wait, there's God too. We've exhausted every other option. Maybe we can pray, and maybe we'll see what happens. See, that's as honest as it gets. That's as human as it gets. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered there's a God that can help me. My prayer rose to you. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. And as soon as you experience this revelation where you are paying attention to God, you instantly look around to other people and say, hey, why aren't y'all paying attention to God like I am?